I wrote a book that really came out of my time in working to try to win more nice things for more people, right? Paid family leave, universal childcare, health care, collective bargaining rights, clean air and water, and a living wage. And I spent nearly 20 years doing that. And in 2017, decided that there was something holding us back. And it didn't make any sense how this country that invented the American dream was falling so short of it for so many of its people. And so I hit the road and I ended up talking to hundreds of people. That formed the basis for the book, The Sum of Us. And then I've just spent the last 6 months back out on the road again, talking to more people exclusively about their victories. And exclusively about victories that brought people together across lines of race and politics and won nice things for more people. And that is a podcast that's out right now, also called The Sum of Us. But something I learned in all of those conversations, probably 1,000 conversations with people all across the country, is that it is stories. It is stories that helps people see themselves in a new way, that helps people see themselves and blame others for the conditions of their lives and put the blame where it belongs. And it's stories that help us see the potential of organizing and the potential of power building. And so instead of going straight into an academic conversation here on this campus, I actually want to spend a good chunk of time just hearing your stories and the stories of these incredible campaigns that rocked the world. And so I want to start with you, Michelle. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and how you ended up working at Starbucks?
Sure. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I did leave for a little while, but I've been back for a long time, and that's home, and I intend to stay there. I grew up in a single parent home. My mom primarily raised myself and my younger sister and brother. My dad was an active part of our lives, but it was definitely a little bit separate. As far as union background, both my father and my maternal grandfather belonged to the same union growing up, which is CSEA, civil service. And they both worked for SUNY at Buffalo. And so I didn't know a lot about the union. I knew that we had really great health benefits because of the union. I remembered going to the union picnics as kids. They were always at an amusement park, which was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, I didn't have a lot of labor background. We didn't grow up with a lot of money. And in spite of that, I chose to go into a career in the arts to just ensure that I also didn't have a lot of money. But I loved it, and it was my choice. But I did find myself in my mid-20s needing to find a flexible job that could supplement my income and provide me with health benefits. And that is what brought me to Starbucks. I'd been a customer for a long time, and I knew how I was treated as a customer, which was great. I knew they had a reputation at that point of treating their employees very well, and that, I could work part-time and still qualify for benefits. That's what brought me to the company.
Mm-hmm.
And for the beginning of my career there, I think that they lived up to those expectations, and they lived up to what they call their mission and values. But things started to slip, and they started to slip pre-pandemic. So I'm not going to blame it all on the pandemic. The pandemic was certainly a catalyst for where we are now. But they started to slip before that. We started to see the cost of the benefits go up and the coverage go down. For me, the kicker was I broke my ankle in 2018. And with health insurance that I had through Starbucks, I ended up paying out of pocket completely for everything that went with this medical issue. Right. And I was like, what am I doing here? If this is what I came here for, and this is the results. And so that's where I think I started to have thoughts of like, all right, things either have to get better, or maybe my time here is coming to an end. Mm-hmm. But I loved the people that I worked with, and I loved the community that I worked in. And I liked that I had this second job to come to that felt like coming home in a lot of ways. And I didn't want to necessarily give those aspects of that up. And then we got to the pandemic, and this company that had already started to slip really just let us down. The Starbucks was one of the few companies in the service industry that stayed open throughout the entirety of the pandemic. While all of upper corporate was working from home safely in their, home offices or their kitchens, we were in those stores every single day, pre-vaccine, being asked to do things like not enforce local mask mandates because the company policy is to de-escalate. So even if it was the law in your county that you couldn't serve someone who wasn't wearing a mask, the company was saying, no, we want you to serve those people anyway. So it was just getting absolutely ridiculous. We were putting ourselves at risk daily, potentially bringing whatever we could catch home to our families. And the narrative from the company was that they were doing all of these things to keep us safe, but those of us in the cafes knew that that was absolutely not true. And we would get these things every week called a weekly update, which is basically, corporate telling us all the amazing things they're doing for us. And they would always lead by saying, your safety is at the utmost importance, but that wasn't the reality. The reality of the situation was we were putting ourselves at risk every day. We were making record-breaking profits. The numbers at Starbucks were well above pre-pandemic numbers. And we had a CEO at the time who was on MSNBC and CNN and all of these financial shows, patting himself on the back for bringing in these record-breaking profits in the middle of this pandemic. And I've got coworkers crying in the back room because working full-time in the middle of a pandemic for a multi-billion-dollar, global multinational company don't know if they can pay their rent and put groceries in their fridge. And it just wasn't making sense in my head. I didn't understand how this could be. And at that point, I've been with the company 11 years. So it's a long time. And so June or so of 2021, I just made the decision that I was going to leave. I didn't know where I was going to go, but the health benefits weren't what they were. So staying there is that for an excuse didn't make any sense to me. But part of the reason that Starbucks refers to its employees as partners, aside from the fact that it's a very manipulative way to make us all feel like we're at the same level, is because we are actually granted some stock in the company. It's a minuscule amount to the overall stock in the company, but it's something. And it vests annually, and it always vests in November. So in June, I said, I'm going to stick it out till November when those stocks vest, and then I'm going to walk away. And then in August, a coworker sent me a text message on a Sunday night and said, could we meet for a cup of coffee after one of our shifts? Which was, we that's what we do all day. So I was like, sure. I guess, a cocktail would be better, but sure, we can meet for a coffee. And there was a position coming open at the store, and she was a newer employee, and I assumed maybe she was thinking about going for this promotion and she wanted my take on it. I've had a lot of those conversations, but that's not what it was. We met a few days later, and she asked me what I thought about Starbucks unionizing. And I said, what? Mostly because I didn't hear her. And then she said it again. And I said, what again? Because I did hear her. And I said, I'd never thought about it. And so, but I was curious enough, given the decision I had already come to, if this wasn't a way to stay with this company, to work with my fellow coworkers to make it what it once was or what it claimed that it was. I wanted to know what the details were. So she explained everything. She said there were a bunch of baristas in Buffalo that have been talking the last few weeks, and they thought that this was the best possible solution to all of the problems we've been facing. And she asked if I would support it. And I said, well, I'm about to go back into production for the first time in 2 years, and I don't have a lot of time, but what do you need from me? And she said, well, would you be willing to sign your name to a public letter to Kevin Johnson, just, announcing that we want to do this? And I said, that's it? All you need is my name? And she said, yeah, that's it. And I was like, sure, you can have my name.
And the rest is history.
And that's the turning point for me was a couple of weeks later, though.
Yeah.
Because we did have to go public very quickly. I think that we went public 4 days after I agreed to sign that letter. And we filed the petition at my location and 2 other locations in Buffalo a week after that. And then the corporate onslaught just hit Buffalo. I mean, we're talking well over 100 high-level corporate and other store managers from across the country that essentially just relocated to Buffalo to try to stop this. And I had my first anti-union meeting on September 10th of 2021, and I'll never forget it. It was at a hotel conference room. It was very off-putting. Rosanne Williams, the then president of Starbucks North America, she brings in something like $4 million a year. is, crying crocodile tears in this communal circle in this hotel conference room, telling us that, we're all partners and they let us down. And, we haven't had the true Starbucks experience, but to give them a chance and they were going to make everything right. Because none of the problems that existed in Buffalo existed anywhere else in the country. It was just somehow this little pocket that they'd let this pocket down and they were going to take care of it. And they ended the meeting by saying, so now we're going to talk about this union campaign. We want everybody to vote and we personally want you to vote no. And it was so off-putting to have someone who's making $4 million a year look me in the eyes and tell me that I should be doing something that was completely against my best interests. And I'm looking at the fear of my fellow coworkers who are just very confused about why we're even here and doing all of this. And they said, we're just giving you the facts. So if you want the facts about the union, you need to contact the union organizer. And so I raised my hand and my heart was pounding. And I said, okay, well, I'm one of the union organizers and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. And let's start with all of this misinformation that you just went down the line and we can go through that. And so that was it. That was the moment where I thought I can't be passive. Like just saying, yeah, I'll sign a letter is not the same as standing with my coworkers and fighting. And we left that meeting and I got on the phone with one of the other very vocal supporters in my store. And I said, we need a plan and we need it right now.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, December 9th, we were the first to unionize in the country.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. I want to come back to more details about the organizing campaign. But first, let's bring Chris in. Chris, tell us about how you grew up and how you first decided to organize at Amazon.
I don't think so.
Is there a green light? That's all that. There you go.
All right,
Hey.
sure. Yeah, I grew up right across the river, from Hackensack, New Jersey, born in Passaic, raised in Hackensack by a single mother. My mom worked hard, went to college. Me and my younger brother, we had to pretty much grow up a little bit faster than
It's a little button. Here, give it to me. I'll show you. This little button here under the tape. That works. Is it green? Oh, let me just
Good.
give you mine.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's back.
Yeah, growing up in a single parent household, I saw my mom get up every day, work hard and, go to work and still manage to take care of me and my brother. I had to take on a lot of responsibilities in the household, growing up. And yeah, I didn't have my father around. My father's still incarcerated till this day. And, it also helped me pretty much, grow up a little bit faster, become responsible a lot younger. And I was a fairly good kid. I played sports, loved basketball, loved football. I played a little bit of everything. I ran track. And then I had a passion for music. I definitely did a lot of talent shows as a kid in high school and things like that. I graduated from Hackensack High, went to Florida Atlantic University, moved down to Florida for a while, got homesick because Bush was in office and I couldn't afford to be a student down there. So I came back home to New York and I transferred to the Institute of Audio Research for Sound Engineering. Then I became a rapper for a while. I dropped out of school and I thought I was going to make it big as a rapper. I produced my first mixtape and I had a pretty good buzz in New Jersey, did a lot of shows and then I got married young. I don't know what happened.
You fell in love.
Yeah, pretty much. No longer married anymore, but I did get married at a young age. Then I had my beautiful kids, my twins, one boy, one girl. Nile and Gianni, who are now 10 going on 18.
Mhm.
And, I became an essential worker really, which I already, now that we were deemed essential workers in the pandemic, yeah, I guess I've been an essential worker for a very long time. But between, working and my music, I gave that up to pretty much take care of my household, working odds and end jobs, warehouse jobs, a lot of warehouse jobs, temporary jobs. And then I became a Unite Here member when I got hired at MetLife Stadium. I worked there for about 5 years. Actually, the same time I started at Amazon in 2015. So I opened up the first building in Carteret, New Jersey, EWR9. Came in entry level. I was a picker, outbound picker. And I was making what, $12.75 at the time. I actually left the union job to go to Amazon thinking it would be a better opportunity. That was a mistake, obviously, but in all fairness, I did have conflicts with the contract that we were under. So I thought that Amazon would definitely have some more career opportunities for me, especially being a new building in New Jersey and me being one of the first new hires of that facility. At the time, I was pretty much treated good. I worked hard until I was promoted up. My general manager at the time was African-American, and he promoted up a lot of Black and brown workers in the building. So that helped motivate me to continue to really give the company my all. I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into that company, spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week there, just trying to really elevate myself and elevate everybody around me in my department. Unfortunately, I didn't get that same respect and pretty much for my hard work. Took me 4 years to realize that. Pre-pandemic, I realized that I was a part of a system in Amazon that didn't really care about myself, didn't care about Black and brown workers, didn't care about our promotion opportunities. And I've seen that. I've seen how over the years, people get hired and fired. People didn't get accommodated for. When it came to my own personal career experience, it was horrible. Actually, I was fired from Amazon, not in the pandemic, before that. When I opened up a building in Connecticut, I was put in a situation where, I was the only Black supervisor from New Jersey that was in this new warehouse. All the upper management was either white or Asian, and they were targeting the Black supervisors. So one by one, I seen them get let go. I seen them get put on performance and improvement programs. And then they were giving out final writtens, which I never had. I had a clean record up until that point. And I received my first final written for doing something that I would normally do. And then I noticed that, when it came to getting promoted to become a salaried manager, it was way more difficult for me. I applied one time and didn't even make it past the second round when I had way more experience than anybody in the building. And I've seen that over and over. I applied several times to the point where by the time I was terminated by Amazon in 2020, I applied to become a manager over 50 times. And I never got it, never even got close to it. I had 2 interviews in 5 years. And the second interview, which was given to me in Staten Island in JFK8, the only reason why I was given that interview is because I had to complain about it. And when I did that, the response from the head of HR, who I never met, never had one conversation with, didn't know me, didn't know my work ethic, didn't know what I brought to the everyday table in the building. He told my manager that I have a history of escalating things. And I knew I wasn't going to get that interview. And if I did get the interview, I knew I wasn't going to get the position. And I was right. The next day I got interviewed by a random ops manager. And the day after that, I got my feedback saying I didn't get the position. The day after that, one of my white counterparts, she was promoted into my position, which I've been in for the last 4.5 years. She's promoted to that position 6 months ago. She got promoted over me, and I trained her. So I asked her, I said, how was your interview? And she told me pretty much they brought her in the room, and they asked her a few questions, and they gave her the position. That's never been done before. You usually have to go through 3 interviews before you become a manager. They pretty much skipped everything and just gave it to her. And that right there, pretty much, that was my last year for Amazon before the pandemic. 2019, I was saying, just like Michelle, I was saying, I got stocks. Amazon offers this package called the offer every year. For every year that you work, every peak season, up to $5,000 you can get paid for, but you could never work for Amazon or any of its subsidiaries ever again for your whole entire life.
Let's pause on this for a second, because this is a very interesting fact that I found as well. So normally you would think of turnover, high turnover, as a cost, right? As a bad thing. You have to train new people, it's chaos for management, it's chaos for colleagues, for systems. Amazon has an extraordinarily high turnover rate. And in fact, they offer this buyout after 5 years to ask you to quit, not based on, your performance or anything, and say after 5 years, you can get this buyout to quit and you can never again work there. So in their estimation, they want workers to come in and stay at the bottom and go out. They want that turnover. So you knew that, you experienced that, stuck between a rock and a hard place. You were like, that might be what I do. Exactly as you were saying, I might be a person who leaves. But I just want to, on this point, Chris, why do you think Amazon does that? It is extremely rare and strange. It's not something they teach you in business school, right? To get people in and out. Why do you think Amazon does that?
It's the way they design their system. Like you mentioned, the hire and fire, the churn and burn. When Amazon announces that they're hiring 150,000 people, people, the media portrays that as it's a good thing. They're giving people jobs, but they're not explaining why.
Yeah, right. Why do they need 150 people? Right.
Why there's a need for that.
Right.
And that starts with the CEO. Jeff Bezos already admitted to designing this system years ago, because he thought that, us people in the working class are inherently lazy. So for him, workers at the bottom are just a number, and that's something that I couldn't stand with anymore. I watched not only myself go through the abuse, but other people around me that I really care for. And still to this day, they're my extended family. And when the pandemic started, there was no way I was going to sit back and say, I'm going to work knowing that we're unprotected. We have no PPE. We're being deemed the closest thing to the Red Cross. And my job description just said to have a high school diploma or GED equivalent.
Yeah.
So there was no way I could just be complacent with that. So when the pandemic started, unfortunately, I didn't get to quit. The buyout is in February. So COVID happened in March, before that actually, but by March, New York was the epicenter of the world. And I can tell you now, Staten Island, this building that has over 8,000 employees, COVID was in that building. It was a no-brainer. And we were sitting shoulder to shoulder, shoulder by shoulder, just like everybody here. No mask, no PPE, no cleaning supplies. The TVs was on in their break rooms, just like this setting here, TVs around the wall. and we're watching the news. And they're telling us to socially distance
Right.
and mask up and stay home.
Mm-hmm.
So I got up from the cafeteria and I said, you know what, I'm going to HR. I tried to go through the proper channels. Like, hey, what we doing here? And the answers were just nonchalant. Like, hey, we're following the CDC guidelines. We're doing this, we're doing that. I'm like, where?
Mm-hmm.
I said, I got workers that are passing out, vomiting, not showing up, afraid to show up, have children at home. I have children at home. This doesn't make any sense. We need to close the building down. You know, they was like, we'll get back to you. I said, okay. I had to take further action. So the next day I came into work, and that's when I was told in a manager meeting that we have every day that there were already people in here positive, but not to tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want me to tell any of the workers because they didn't want to cause an uproar, and they wanted to keep business as usual. And that was my last day working for Amazon. I walked out of there along with who is now the vice president of the Amazon Labor Union, Derek Palmer. And we went home to my house, and we started calling the media, calling whoever we could, the governor at the time, calling elected officials, calling the CDC.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously didn't get through to nobody. No media picked up the phone for me. I got a lot of, we'll get back to you, let us know how it go, or, you know, I think they were just so focused on Trump at the time. It was just like, I was just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, never got through to anybody. It wasn't until I had to pretty much figure out a way to get the media's attention. So me and Derek decided to go back to the building, even though, you know, I said I'm not going to go to work. I said I'm going to go tell the workers the truth anyway. So we went back in the cafeteria. We sat in there for 10 hours a day, telling every worker that we saw the truth and that we want to march on the boss, the general manager, to get the building closed. We did that every morning up until about Saturday. And that's when they decided to quarantine just me and nobody else. Because they said that—
What you had was about to catch. That's what they were working about.
Right. So, and I said, you know, the same thing. I'm like, why just me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I ride to work with Derek. I have a department with over 600 people. The person that you claim that I was positive around, she's been around them before I was around her. I was around you guys. I've been in the office all week.
Yeah.
So I think everybody should be quarantined. That's what I said. No, just you. And I didn't get, till this day, no email from Amazon, no termination letter. It just told me, word of mouth, the senior ops by his mouth told me that I was quarantined.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm going to respect that decision. I left.
Mm-hmm.
But then I said, you know, if I leave and I'm quarantined, what about everybody else? So that's when I said, you know what, let me try one more time with the media. And the New York Post finally got back to me. Of course, I had to gas up the numbers. I said, they asked me, they always want to know, you know, how many people? So I said about 200.
You're going to be at this protest.
Oh, yeah, at the
Yeah.
walkout.
Yeah.
So, you know, their eyes got big. Oh, wow, 200? But I didn't expect it to go as viral as it did. You know, when they published, you know, everybody's talking about it. Now the media is picking up. They're calling me now. So I said, okay, this is going to be good. But this is my first walkout ever. I wasn't the organizer. I wasn't the union organizer, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me and Derek, we drove on March 20th. We drove towards the building and literally saw a helicopter, Channel 4. I'm like, oh, shoot. Yo, what did we do? All the media was out there, vans and everything. I'm like, oh, man. I said, you know what? We just got to go.
Yeah.
There's no turning back, you know? So us and the way we planned the walkout, I know perception is everything. I know the media can't go on the property, and I knew it was lunchtime. So I checked the weather. I say, working at Amazon on a rainy day, everybody's inside. But on a sunny day, when we get a chance to get free, we go outside to eat lunch. So it was about 65 degrees that day. I said, everybody's gonna be outside. So I planned it at—
They're just gonna walk out the door.
I'm gonna walk out the door. So I planned it at 12:30. So the media was there at like 11:30.
Mhm.
And at 12:30, they were worried because nobody came out the door. I said, well, this is a 1.5 million square foot building, 14 NFL football field. Give them about 5 more minutes. And then that time, people started walking out. And that's all they knew, was that there was a walkout. And that's all I need to know. So from that moment, there was their walkout. There was our chance to talk to the media,
Mhm.
and more people spoke up
Sure.
that saw us doing it
Mhm.
because, they wanted to say something the whole time.
Yeah.
So 2 hours after that walk, I was fired.
And so now, of course, the way both of these stories not end, but the arc that began with both of these stories of these first moments was with a successful world-shattering union vote at the Buffalo Starbucks and the Staten Island JFK Amazon warehouse. And I want to get into a little bit why it is that a union is still necessary for this workforce in general, the restaurant workforce, 1 to 2% rate of unionization, warehouse a little bit higher, but not much. Why is it still necessary when Amazon and Starbucks both say they pay really high wages? You guys are both talking about stock benefits here. You thought that you would do better at Amazon than you did at your unionized job at the stadium. You went to Starbucks for the benefits. Today, why is a union necessary in each of these industries?
You want me to go first?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, this most simplistic answer is it's the only way to hold companies accountable. So Starbucks does claim that they offer a slew of fantastic benefits and other sort of perks to working for the company. I will tell you from someone who's been there for 12 years, they're definitely not as good as they claim they are. But I've also watched them come in the last dozen or so years and pull things away without any explanation or conversation. And the only way to ensure that the benefits stay your benefits is through a collective bargaining agreement.
Mhm.
I mean, that's simply what it is. Even when they've come in during this organizing campaign and essentially granted a lot of what the union's asks were to begin with, seniority pay and different types of benefits, they've granted them to non-union stores. They have not granted them to union stores because, that's their game. But when media loves to ask, Starbucks is so wonderful. I mean, he just said yesterday he's going to give you all of these things.
Mhm.
I said, yeah, but who's going to stop him from coming back tomorrow and taking those all away?
Mhm.
And I've watched it happen.
Right.
So for me, that's the big thing, is the fact that nothing's guaranteed without a contract. And I don't care how wonderful your employer is or claims to be. That's just the reality of the situation.
Chris?
Yeah, the same. Amazon has a policy that says they can change their policies at any time. So, we tell workers all the time, say, you try to go in there and ask for a raise because inflation or because rent went up, and see how that conversation goes.
Mhm.
But if you go in there with everybody, you have a voice, you have power. And, we realize, the only way, yes, we're going to hold the company accountable is by unionizing, but also it's also about having a better quality of life for us. We don't get taught these things in school. We don't get taught the real labor history in this country. If you'd have told me I could be as cool as a union organizer as a rapper, I would have been did this.
right, let's talk about that for a minute. Two things come up for that. So here at SLU, you get taught labor history, absolutely. But for both of you, even though interestingly, you both had unionized parents, which I think says something about this region of the country, that is very different in other parts of the country. You didn't come up through, as an activist, as an organizer, and yet at various moments, the tradition, the intellectual tradition, the stories, the history of people just like you over the generations, seeing the class struggle for what it is, naming it and fighting against it has been very important and has helped you in some way. And I think it'd be great just to hear a little bit about that. Who has influenced you? Whose story, whose writing has been helpful to you as you've done this audacious thing? I want to start with you, Chris.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, who motivates and inspire, or, what have I read? And Zara and Jacob could tell you, my schedule is so crazy that I barely have time to myself sometimes. So for me, I get my motivation from everybody around me. The organizers that I organize with at Amazon, I know what they're going through because I used to work there. And for them to be full-time organizers and full-time employees, and not just regular employees, they have to be model employees because they have a target on their backs.
That's right.
So for me to be, a leader for them, I have to be strong, and I have to also bring the same energy that I had on day one. That's one of Amazon's principles. Every day is day one. And we say the same thing on our side. Every day is day one with the labor movement. We have to, whether we had a small victory or a defeat, we have to just hold our head high and stay resilient because it's a long fight. And I think that just motivates me, seeing where we came from and where we at now in just 2.5 years. It still blows my mind. We just won back in April, so it's still fresh to us.
Michelle?
You are definitely correct in not having any sort of organized labor background or history. So I definitely had to do a crash course in a lot of that. In January or February of this year, after we'd won the first couple stores in Buffalo, we had a staff organizer come on as our field director for the campaign through Workers United. Her name is Daisy Pitkin, and she's remarkable. I think her organizing background is remarkable in and of itself, but the way she's able to relate to workers, I think, is the most amazing. So I've learned a lot from her, and she had just recently released a memoir book based on her organizing back in the early 2000s for industrial laundries out in Arizona. And I read it out of curiosity. I mean, this is how often do you get to read the work of someone who you are now acquainted with and working with? And so it hit her, and I have actually not even talked about the fact that I finished this book because it hit so close to home that parts of it were hard to process for me in terms of, what those workers were going through. And union busting is so, there's such a playbook for it. Yeah. And so to read about another industry with workers who were going through something that I had just gone through and continued to go through, and then see it through her viewpoint, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about what I didn't know I needed to know about organizing and interpersonal relationships and that connection that's formed. And I was able to sort of relay it. It's a little bit different being a worker organizer like Chris and I are, because he's right. What we have going for us is that we know exactly what these workers are going through and exactly what they need because we're going through it, because we went through it. But to then see it from the perspective of someone trained in organizing and see how you could marry those things together, that was invaluable. And she's remarkable in general, but being able to read her story to see how she got from where she was there to where she is now was really amazing.
Let's talk about worker organizing and what many people are referring to as the new school organizing and the new school labor movement. Now, there are a lot of people in this room who know so very much about the history of labor and would be able to say, actually, this is a lot like what the meatpackers did. And truly, and that is great. But we, how old are you, Chris?
34.
How old are you?
39.
Okay, and I'm 42, I think. In our lifetimes, right, which has been the inequality era, right? I was born in 1980, right? The year when Ronald Reagan took office, the year of, just downward spiral of labor organizing and a massive shifts in the economy away from industrialized sectors into low density sectors, and just relentless cultural campaigns against unions and just lack of relevancy in so many of our lives of labor unions. This does feel new and this does feel different. And so I want to just hear a little bit from both of you about what you're building at Amazon Labor Union and at Starbucks Worker United that is different, what some of the challenges are. One of the things I want to keep asking you throughout this conversation is, what do you need from us? There are a lot of people online and in this room who want to help. So just talk about this moment, what you're trying to build, how it's different, and what are the challenges and what do you need?
Yeah. Well, we're trying to save this damn country. I can tell you that.
That's right.
That's what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
To be honest with you, the Amazon Labor Union is representation of everybody. The working class. We came together as an independent worker-led union with no political ties, just focusing on work-related issues. And that resonated with the workers at JFK. There's no other way we could have went around it. Of course, people ask why we didn't affiliate and, why we went independent to make it harder on ourselves. Well, two things. Amazon's been around for 28 years. Obviously, other established unions couldn't get it through, couldn't get the job done. And there's been attempts on Amazon for years that people never even heard of.
Mhm.
We had to adapt to the 21st century style of organizing. A lot of established unions traditionally organize in secrecy. They do things different. They have a bunch of salts. We couldn't.
What are salts?
Salts are, people that work for the union that are there to organize the workers. Secrecy. Most of the things that Amazon used against unions, we knew as an independent, it would be hard for them to do. They can't use the president's salary because I'm unemployed. They can't say that we have a history of wins or losses or financial woes. They can't say that we're a third party because we're the coworkers, that we're in the room, in the captive audiences. The same type of tactics they use in Alabama, we expected that. So for us forming something new, that was the way to go for us, and it worked. As far as what we can ask for now, we're trying to go nationwide. We have a campaign that we just announced in Moreno Valley, outside of San Bernardino. We have one upstate. I just came back from Albany. ALB1 is their election is next month, October 12th. We also have a building in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, MQY1. We still have LDJ5, and we definitely have to keep engaging with JFK8 workers as we wait on the contract. We just had a huge victory in court last week. We're waiting for our certification so that we can get the company to come to the table. We know that's not going to happen. So for the outside community support, we're just saying, you know what, let's build up our solidarity fund, AKA strike fund. Let's show up to our demonstrations. We just had a huge one on Labor Day right here. We got another one coming up on Indigenous Day, also known as Columbus Day. Some people say, but you know, we're gonna have demonstrations coming up, and we want community support for sure, and definitely support us with donating if you can, until we get a contract.
All right, great. All right, Michelle.
So ours is a little bit different, but not too much from Chris. We did organize with a parent union, Workers United, which is an independent affiliate of SEIU. I think it's interesting to note that for the most part, any big union or parent union willing to take on a company like Starbucks is very unlikely. So the fact that this joint board or this local in Rochester, New York was like, sure, we'll help you do that, was pretty crazy to begin with. But the partnership we've been able to form with Workers United as the campaign of Starbucks Workers United is worker-led. It is them letting us take the lead and bringing us into positions where we're able to make the strategic decisions for the campaign. There's people like Daisy who are experienced organizers who can sort of guide us through that process, but the organizing is being done by the workers because it has to be, because there's nobody who knows what happens in those stores better than the workers who are in those stores. So the way that this sort of evolved is it started in Buffalo because it had to start somewhere. And we ended up with 2 organized stores by the beginning of this year of January. And then workers from the stores were reached out to by workers at other Starbucks across the country saying, hey, we really want to do this. And so then it became like this sort of, all right, well, I'm going to help this store in Mesa, Arizona. And communicate with the leader in there. And then Mesa is going to help this store in Phoenix and communicate. So it's become this sort of chain of worker to worker to worker to worker, which actually works completely into Starbucks. You know, they call it the partner to partner connection. They've influenced this from the beginning. They've encouraged this. There's all sorts of hashtags that have always existed. There's been, you know, Starbucks partner Facebook groups since there was Facebook, where people have communicated with each other across the country and across the world. So this sort of structure, internal structure of communication existed. And when one of us was abused, we were all abused, and we knew that. We knew we were being exploited for our labor. We knew we were being completely undervalued. We knew that this company was bringing in billions of dollars of profit off of our labor, and we were seeing nothing for it. And so everyone was just sort of sitting on their hands waiting to see what would happen with that first couple of stores. And once that happened, that was it. You know,
how many petitions have there been at Starbucks stores across the country now?
So the numbers are very hard to keep up with because we're doing a store by store and there's just under 9,000 corporate owned Starbucks in the country. But I think as of Wednesday, we had won 242. That could be different today because there seem to be elections all the time. And we're over 350 filed petitions. So there's other, you know, votes upcoming.
Okay.
And it just keeps going.
So we're about to move to taking some questions from the audience and from both audiences. But first, I just want to ask one question as my final one here for the 2 of you. Let's talk about tech. Let's talk about technology, right? Because both of these companies, as part of their record-breaking profitability, have really relied on technology in some of the ways that customers see, like the mobile app, which accounted for before the pandemic, and I think really beginning in that period of the slide that you talked about before the pandemic, for the vast majority of orders made at Starbucks, right? So we see that as customers, but with Amazon, obviously tech-enabled, but so much technology, monitoring, evaluating, controlling the worker experience. I have 2 questions there. One, how do you think this has impacted the lives of workers? And what do you want to see differently about technology inside an Amazon warehouse and technology inside of the Starbucks cafe?
Yeah, well, Amazon definitely, they are innovative for sure. They progressed so rapidly over the years. I know when I was there, productivity was about 250 an hour. Now it's over 400.
And what, just for people who've never worked in an Amazon warehouse, what does that mean? What is a picker? What is 250 what? Paint the
Right.
thing for us.
Right. So yeah, my department was responsible for picking customers' items that they ordered. I had to stand in front of the robot shelf or bookshelf that looked like, a bookshelf that you would see in the store, and it's on top of a robot that drives it around on the Kiva floor. It will bring the work to your station, and these are customer items. You pick them pretty much all day, and you have to do that at a rate of 250 an hour. That was back when I was hired in 2015. Now, it's over 400. So 400 items an hour. You're touching over 4,000 packages, and you work 10-hour shifts. Some people work 12-hour shifts. So,
And you were good at it,
yeah,
from what I've read.
yeah. I was pretty much number one for a while, and I definitely told my new hires, if you got a gym membership, cancel it, because you're about to do 10 to 12 hours of calisthenics. You're bending, you're reaching, you're pulling, and Amazon knows that. That's why, once again, they designed a system to hire and fire. They know people ain't gonna last long. And technology, it calculates the rate of productivity.
Yeah.
They go by percentages. If a large percentage can do a higher rate, they increase the productivity. But we also have to use that with organizing as well. On our side, a lot of things that helped us out was using technology, using social media to our advantage. We had to really do things that were outside the norm of organizing, and also things that the company can't do. And I can tell you right now, TikTok played a very large part of our campaign, because they hated it. We went viral on there. The next day, they sent like 4 letters to the board over TikTok. If you paid attention in our court hearing, they used TikTok videos pretty much the whole time as evidence. So it's like, that's how the importance of reaching mass and getting messaging out there. We have to counter that as well on our side. So technology, yeah, I'm all for it, but as long as it's in the hands of the right people.
I completely agree with that. So in terms of technology in Starbucks, it's drastically changed the working environment. So we measure things by half-hour increments, half-hour transactions. And so I think when I started with the company, if you hit a 50 transaction half hour, that was pretty substantial. And that's a transaction. That's not an item. That's not to say that every one of those transactions could have 12 different components, but it's just the individual transaction. Now we've got, I'm in a cafe, so I don't even have a drive-through to account for. So I've got one less channel than these drive-through stores, which are taking over most of the company. We're doing an average of maybe 104, 105 half hour. There's no cap. So people are mobile ordering. They don't know that their drinks could be backed up for a half hour, but the company doesn't necessarily care about that, because as soon as you hit that order button, they've got your money. So you go into a lot of these really busy stores, you'll see just wasteland of abandoned food and drinks that people came in to get on their way to work or on their way to school and couldn't wait the time that it took for us to make them. So what ends up happening is they abandon it. And the company policy is, this person who's probably very upset because they spent this money and didn't get these items that they wanted because the barista could not physically keep up with what was coming in. They can then call and ream one of us out for not getting their item. And then we tell them, we're really sorry. We appreciate your business. Please come in and we'll make that again for you for free whenever you're able to. So we're doubling, just in that regard, it's doubling our workload, because we have to remake the item that we already did make. There's no technology cap that says, hey, these drinks are backed up 30 minutes. Maybe we just automatically shut the system down. in order to get the system shut down, you have to go through this chain. You have to like go through the store manager, who has to go through the district manager. There's usually a lag. By that point, you've got a lobby full of incredibly angry people who are not angry at Howard Schultz. They're angry at the barista who's, been running around for 3 hours already, got there at 4 a.m. to open the store. And so it's changed everything. It's changed the entire working environment. Starbucks used to tout, in fact, this training has recently stopped, and it just occurred to me in the last couple of weeks that they're not even promoting this anymore, but they used to call the shops the third place.
Yep.
And it was like you had your house, you had your work environment, and then you had Starbucks, which was your third place. And you should feel, not only should you feel the ability to come in and have that, but the employees should feel the ability to have that as well. And we used to have regular like third place training, how to ensure that the customer had that experience. And those are just not even happening anymore. So that right there tells you the business model has shifted completely. We're not trying to create an experience. Interestingly enough, we're graded, each store is graded on what's called the customer connection score. And that is based on the ability to have a connection with a customer that they can then rate you on. And you are, could be potentially disciplined if it considerably falls, but that doesn't exist in the environment anymore. So the fact that it's still being used as a gauge as to how productive or how successful these stores are, it's just everything contradicts the other, and it's only getting consistently worse.
I mean, the common thread here is the humanity is being stripped out of these experiences. Obviously, Starbucks had an ambition of being quite a humanistic place. Amazon never had that ambition. Every time you say picker, I just bristle, right? I mean, I'm sorry, the vast majority of the warehouse workers are brown and black. We all know what happened to our ancestors when, the productivity of the cotton picking became mechanized with the cotton gin, and I'm having a moment. I'm having a moment. But the underlying issue here is that when you combine the extraordinary wealth that can be created, right? The pandemic particularly was an absolute windfall for both of these companies, right? And you hear it in the changes in the worker experience. Of all of the profit and revenue that was created, a Brookings study showed that 98% of the wealth went to shareholders, right, who are already in the top 5% of the income distribution. Just 2% went to workers, right? So they touted these wage increases and all of that happened during the pandemic, that happened during this moment of tight labor markets, but the value is really going to shareholders. All right, so we're going to have our first couple of questions. Michael.
Thanks, Heather. Just a few reminders before we jump to the questions. One, this event will be the full video and the edited podcast version will be available in a few days after today. And we encourage you to share it widely with your networks. Two, if you didn't hear before, SLU students are invited to go up to 19B directly after this to have a small scale get together with Chris and Michelle. And there's food outside and you're welcome to take it up. And for everybody here, food outside, you're welcome to stay here in this room to eat it. We especially welcome you to go down to our new 14th floor where there's an outdoor balcony. It's beautiful outside. Take the lunch down there, get to know some of our staff, faculty, and hang out there. Okay, so now to the questions. Because we're getting questions both here in person and on Zoom, we're going to alternate back and forth. For those in person, if you have questions that you'd like us to read, just raise your hand and we'll come around and collect the form. If you'd like to read your question live, please stand over here to the left side of the room. Folks on the right side, if you don't mind coming out to the hallway and then re-entering on this other side so you don't cross in front of the camera, that would be appreciated. And we'll get started with 2 questions from Zoom and give a chance to folks here to get their questions to us. So these 2 questions are, I think you both have, Heather, Chris and Michelle have addressed this a bit, but they're really good questions. One, Michelle Keller asks, what do you believe is the best support that union workers, other members of unions can provide you at this time? And then 2, how can racial justice movements better protect the labor rights of their Black workers, Indigenous workers, and other workers of color? So 2 questions relating to solidarity, and I think both for people in the New York area, but around the country and the world. So.
Well, definitely, we definitely got support from many unions across the nation that always help showing that solidarity, the same struggle. We're all in the same struggle, the same fight. We have to always amplify the fact that, the working class as a whole, we have to band together. And, every union plays a part of it. Amazon Labor Union is fairly new. We're independent and brand new to the scene. We have a lot of parent unions that are in New York City, being a union town, that we can lean on for advice on how to navigate, especially through the legal aspect. And they've seen and dealt with similar companies, may not be as big as Amazon, but there definitely been battles before us that have been powerful. And we're happy to learn and definitely just really work together to beat Amazon. We all have to be David versus Goliath, and as far as social injustice, environmental, whatever you represent, whatever movement, women's rights, abortion, gun rights, I think as union leaders, people see me. I've been out there on the picket lines for all of these movements. I think it's important that we take a stance as a union president. I call on other union presidents to do the same thing with their unions. We have to understand that everybody's a part of the working class. I don't even like to really say labor movement because it's everybody, whether you're employed or not, whether you're fighting for Black Lives Matter or you're fighting for Extinction Rebellion or DSA or whatever, it doesn't matter. You're a part of the working class. So this is your fight, and I think that everybody should just be out there for any demonstration. If there's a protest over women's rights, unions should show up. If there's a protest over George Floyd, unions should show up. It doesn't matter. And I'm trying to lead by example by doing that. I've done that. And I'm going to encourage and continue to encourage people to do the same thing.
I'll keep it very brief and echo most of what Chris said. Unless you're the top 1%, we're all fighting the same fights or very similar to the same fights. And for hundreds of years, the bosses, whoever they were called at that point, used to go to the racial and social issues, used those to further divide the working class, to further divide the workers. When there were Black and white slaves, they decided, oh, there's too many of them. This is too powerful. We're going to promote the white ones above so that there's a class system. And we saw it happen internally in the Starbucks campaign. We saw new hires hired into certain stores that had white, vocally white leaders, and other workers hired into stores that had vocally Black leaders. And it was, you can't say that these weren't deliberate attempts to pit each other, pit us against each other. And it's sickening. But acknowledging that this is a tactic, acknowledging that the goal is to further continue to divide us in whatever way they can, and just saying, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to stand together in spite of any kind of differences that we have, because we're fighting the same enemy.
Yeah.
That's what Chris is saying. We need to show up to everybody's fights.
Underneath the tape. The black tape, right above the white tape. Oh, no. Okay. Here, bring it to me, I'll show you. No problem. It's this little button right there. There you go.
Okay, this is a question from in person. Thank you very much. It had to do with the size of the workforce. What is the average workforce size of a Starbucks store and Amazon warehouse? And does size affect organizing strategies in any way?
I think definitely. The answer is definitely. The average Starbucks store is somewhere between 25 and maybe 45, depending on the location. There are some bigger locations. So, individually, depending on the situation, it can be thought, I think, a little bit easier to organize that smaller unit. But then you have to think of it in the grand scheme of, one 30-person store has absolutely no power, even if you've managed to organize it. So it's individual stores, but you got that one store has to lead to 1,000 stores. And that's what we're working towards. So it's kind of different and the same as what Chris is going through, because their warehouse is massively huge. So I can't imagine what it was like to get that many people on the same page.
Yeah, Amazon buildings, no less than 1,000 workers. For fulfillment centers, they could be anywhere from 3,500 up to where we're at in Staten Island. We have 8,300. So yeah, you're going to
And
have
55% of them voted yes.
55% of them voted yes.
And we had another, wow. We had another question from the floor, for Chris. How do you and others at the ALU feel about big established unions like the Teamsters now launching campaigns to take on and unionize Amazon?
I mean, well, that's great. You know, they had 28 years. I hope it happens. You know, I don't know. I mean, I seen that they launched efforts against them. I hope that you know, we work together on that. But you know, if you don't got workers, you don't have anything. You know, and if you don't know Amazon, you don't have anything. I could tell you it's going to be a challenge for any union that wants to organize Amazon. It just doesn't happen by magic. You have to be invested, and you have to know workers that are invested. It just doesn't happen by throwing salts in the building, throwing union organizers in the building. It's a lot more intangibles to it. My lead organizers, Derek Palmer, for example, he's a 7-year Amazon vet. The rest of my organizers on my executive board, they're all 3+ years at Amazon. They know the ins and outs of the company. It's a different type of investment that they have with these workers there. So for the Teamsters, for any other union, the AFL, CIO, whatever, doesn't matter. You have to understand that workers have to get to a point where they're ready to organize themselves.
Okay, we have a question from Zoom regarding global strategy. They addressed it to Michelle, but maybe Chris, you can add your thoughts. So Michelle, is there any thought about how to impact the dependence of Starbucks on the importation of coffee beans and sugar from the global South countries as a way to pressure Starbucks and gain support for SWU's labor rates?
So yes, there's lots of different strategy and lots of people looking at supply chains and all sorts of stuff like that. I think it's important to acknowledge that it started, what we started was in the cafes and on the floor levels, but Starbucks really is a global corporation that employs thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people across the world, all who have a different role in, getting that cup of coffee to you. And I think it's fairly safe to assume that probably all of them are being exploited the same way the hourly workers in the cafes are being exploited. So I don't have any specifics as to what that looks like, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, these global corporations, their game is exploitation. I mean, that's the only way they become these multi-billion-dollar global corporations is by exploiting the workers who bring them the goods and the services. And so it should be addressed in that way. You have to start somewhere. And, we started here, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other facets that need to be examined.
Okay, there's so many questions here. I think we're just going to do one more because there's another gathering after this. So here you go.
Thank you so much. This is a question for Chris. Could you describe a little bit more your experience engaging Trump supporters in the Amazon labor movement and how that went, and if there's any successes or key challenges in that whole experience?
Well, I'm in Staten Island. It's Trump Island. I didn't, we couldn't not include them because of their political views. We had a situation I remember during the campaign where we had a group chat with some workers and somebody said something about Trump and then they started going back and forth. And that was a lesson learned. We said, you know what, we can't have conversations around that because it divides the workers, and we didn't want that. The guy was pro-union. That's all that mattered. We need every vote count for us. So, we had to accept them and whatever ideology they had towards politics, that's fine. For us, it was all about what's going on in the building. What are our working conditions like? And once again, Staten Island, if you go there, you're going to see Trump flags everywhere. I mean, it was one literally right next to the Union Hall. I was like, wow. So we just kept our identity neutral and really just respected everybody's right to have their own opinions on things and kept it the fight and the anger towards the boss. That's the commonality of all these fights. Doesn't matter if you're on the left or right. Like I told Lindsey Graham, this is a workers' thing. This is worker problems. And that's everybody. So that's how the ALU was formed, and we continue by that model till this day.
I will say, to add to this really quickly, yes, and for Chris Smalls to be the leader of this union means that if somebody's going to be pro this union, they have to be willing to respect the leadership and the humanity of a strong Black man. And that is an important piece of the work too. And I think that is a part of the power of you being the face of this union and of saying who are some of the strongest leaders of the working class and always have been. And it's why it's so important for both of your voices sitting here together, saying that this multiracial working class is one that's going to reshape the country. I want to thank you for your leadership, for your time, for your generosity, for this audience, for your patience. And of course, as always, to the School of Labor and Urban Studies at CUNY and all the staff who put this event together. Thank you. Keep fighting. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.